Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to say that I did enjoy the contribution of the member for Laventille East. He is a very capable, young man, and I think brings a lot of sincerity to the business of representation, and I want to recognize that. His speech was good, and he advocated for something that he liked and he thinks can be a good thing, and that is good representation, and it's good to use the parliament for that. But if you had left out the politics of it, you would have been a lot better. I guarantee you, because your points were good. You didn't need to politicize it and get into the partisan thing. But I want to commend my colleague, the member for Chaguanas, for bringing this motion here this afternoon. Education is a very important thing. I think we can generally agree on that. And it really can make the difference between life success and failure, or like life opportunities and limited opportunities. And I want to commend the member for Chaguanas East for bringing this motion and for speaking so well to the motion that he brought to this House. I also want to congratulate my colleague from Caroni East for his contribution. He is a person who likes to deal with facts and figures, and he gave us ample evidence of progress during his tenure as minister and during the period in which the People's Partnership was in government. I don't want to get into any contentious issues today on this important thing. Having already said, as other people have said, I think my colleague from Chaguanas East said it, and I think the Minister of Education said it, and I think my colleague from Laventille East Mover said it, that education is something in a way that should be beyond politics. I think it makes little difference whether one government puts a policy in and the other government builds on it, because at the end of the day you are dealing with year by year. In this particular country it's about 20,000 a year. Year by year you're dealing with that population, and you're really building generations, and you're building individuals, you're building families, you're building communities. That is what education is about. And to politicize education is really, in my view, mean. I think you bring a meanness to education when you start to politicize it, and when you think of it in narrow politics and narrow partisan terms. Education is for the nation. Education is for society. It is for community. It is for the world, because you don't know where you're going to be. And wherever you happen to be, if you are a person who has some education and can make a contribution, or have some talent and you can make a contribution, you will do it, because people live there wherever you are, whether it is in Trinidad and Tobago or anywhere else. And I want to say that, you know, education, we unfortunately have got ourselves trapped in the notion that education is about examinations. And there is a role for examinations, because examinations do tell you how much you have achieved based on certain kinds of curriculum and certain kinds of questions, etc. But it's not the be-all and end-all of education. It is an aspect of education. And when you narrow education, just as if you politicize it to examinations alone, what you are really doing is destroying the educational process. The second thing is that education is about work. So the reason why you go to school, why you go from level to level, is because you are trying to expose yourself to knowledge and learning and teaching so that you can come out into the system and do something. Now that work can be of any kind. You can be a professional, you can go do a job, you can have a skill, you can live and develop your entrepreneurship skill and build a business, whatever it is. So there's a relationship between the acquisition and the engagement of knowledge, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the application of knowledge in the world of work. The world of work being in its widest sense, working at anything that you do and making yourself productive and making yourself a contributor to the development of community and society. But education is also beyond that. It's about life, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because at the end of the day, you know, success depends on the way we live, not only the work that we do or the number of degrees that we get or the number of examinations that we pass, but the way we engage people, the way we engage our families, the way we engage our communities, the way we engage the people we work with, the way we engage the society at large. And therefore, when you think of education, you have to think about those things. You have to think about all three things. And that is why it is important. Many of the elements in my colleague's motion here, whereas so and so, and although it takes a strong stand in here, which is that be it resolved that this House condemn the government for its gross failure in the education sector and the resultant detrimental effect on generations of students. Although it takes a strong stand on this, it deals with many important things, aspects of the education system that have either not risen to the challenge or have failed, the issue of curriculum, and many, many other issues in here. Before I go on, though, I want to say that the member for Laventille Mova East talked about the Laventille Mova Schools Improvement Program. And this is a pilot. And in many ways, pilots and experimentation are critical in education, I want to say.
Correct.
Because this notion of taking a system and ramming it down the throat of a generation is really not a good thing. And education system should have the capacity for innovations and interventions, pilot programs, experimentation, because you always want to try new things. And I hope that this program turns out to be successful. I have someone very close to me who is in fact working with the children in the Latterpie School, Russell Latterpie School. And therefore, I sometimes am told about the good work that is going there and how the children respond and so on. So I appreciate that. And I hope that the program is successful and that it does well. And if it is successful, then it becomes transferable to other parts of the country. And it can even be transferred to places where you have so-called good education, precisely because of what I said, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which is that education is more than exams. It is more than preparing for work, although it is both of those things. And it is really about a preparation for life and to make one successful in the business of living. But I want to say, I'm sorry the Minister of Education is not here. I do want to speak for the people of my constituency too, just as you did Laventille East Mova. I want to say that on behalf of the people of the community of Prisal Primary, Government Primary is a very, very good school. And it was an absolutely dilapidated school. I work with the Minister of Education in a collaborative way, And we were able, through this work of the community there and the Parent Teachers Association and the supervisors in Central, to get agreement. And the Minister of Community Development was very helpful in that regard, in providing the community center, and the Ministry of Education then renovated the community center to make it appropriate for the students to move to the community center. But I want to say, having done that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that primary school, that situation emerged because the school that was being built, and which was about maybe 50, 60% completed, was abandoned. And if you go there now, you will see that it has really become a kind of jungle, and it's infested with rats and snakes and all kinds of things. And that school needs to be built. It was allocated for in 2017, it was allocated for in 2018, and it was allocated for in 2019. And that school still needs to be built. So without making a quarrel with the Minister of Education, he has given me his word that this school will in fact be completed. And I want to say to the Minister of Education that I am pleading on behalf of my constituents who are grateful that we were able to move from the school, which had become a clear and present danger to the parents and teachers, to the community center. I also want to acknowledge the contribution of the Minister of Community Development to that. But I want to say that what the parents and teachers and children really want, and what the community wants, and what this Member of Parliament would like to see, is the completion of the school within the fiscal year 2018-2019. The second thing I would like to say is that we also have a similar situation with the Flanagan RC School, where school started, and it is, Member for Tawarie, is about what, 40% complete? And it was left abandoned. They took the children and they put them in the church. And the church was in a horrible condition, and we had problems there. And the fence fell down, the children were in danger, all kinds of things. Again, in a collaborative fashion, I worked with the Minister of Education. We got the fence up. And a donor, a private donor, a community person, tiled the entire floor and made it habitable to the students, that's to say the church. And therefore the children are much more comfortable now because it's a small school. It's not a large school. It's a small population of children. And Flanagan Town itself is a small community. And so they have gotten improvement because of the intervention of a private donor, somebody with a good heart who made it possible for the school to be better, to better serve the children now in the church. So the church has gotten a benefit. But again, I would say to the Minister of Education, how much better would it be if we could make the necessary arrangements? That school was not allocated for. I don't know if there are any plans to complete it. But in as much as they have already put so much concrete in this, and that the community needs a school and the children are in a church, can't we do what is necessary to give the children and the community the school? So again, I want to raise that particular matter with the Minister of Education. And finally, my colleague raised the issue of the Londonville Presbyterian School, the member for Chaguanas East. And that school was in Londonville, of course, and it was in an awful condition. They had two sets of children going there, the Presbyterian school and I think from the government school, is that right? Both of them together. When I went there, I used to really feel for the children, but in order not to depress them, I would lift my spirit and try to lift theirs. But when I walked outside and I talked to the teachers, it was really horrible. They were suffocating in there. And eventually they were moved to the Endeavour Community Center. Jerningham, sorry, Community Center. That is a comfortable facility. I've been to see the children there, and they are well off there. But the solution, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the construction of a school that would allow for these children to get an education, and also to have a school, which is what you need, and then the community can have its community center back for the things that are important for it. I mention those things because they are important to my constituents, they are important to me, and they are important to the country. I think everybody, every community, everybody will agree that each community should have basic services that support the development of that community. Those would be the religious institutions that they might have. You'd have churches, mandirs, mosques, etc., that liaise with the community. One would be a school, one would be a nearby police station, you need some health facility and so on. And that is the way we should look at the development of the communities here. There are about 600 of them, maybe a little less, throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And what we should strive to do is to make each community as self-sufficient as possible, with interdependence across communities and involving several communities that are nestled together, and in which larger regions have the capacity to support the region, and the people who live in the region have the capacity to get goods and services from the local government and the business community and the social resources that are amassed in any particular community. And therefore, a school in that situation is very important. Now, I had a look at the draft education policy paper 2017 to 2022. And I simply remind that we are in 2019, and it means that almost 2 years have gone in the articulation of the issues in here, and that it looks into the future for 2022. Now, when I read about the Ministry of Education, it reads well. The Ministry of Education is a high-achieving, people-centered, proactive organization capable of harnessing and releasing the innate dynamism, innovativeness, and intellect of the 21st century learner, intent on building human resource capacity in the pursuit of national sustainable development. I cannot really quarrel with that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and there's nothing really wrong with it. But you have to ask the question always, anything that you are doing, you say, what am I going to do? Why am I doing this? So you have a rationale for doing it. You say, when am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? And then the most important question is how? How am I going to do it? And I think it is on the how issues that the document really, in my view, fails. And when I look through the document from place to place, for instance, if I look at the executive summary, which is page 11, it says here strategic objectives to provide effective management and administration of the education system, to review the legislative framework, to conduct research, to inform policy, to develop and implement monitoring and evaluation, to ensure the education sector is adequately funded, to collaborate and communicate with stakeholders in education. And when the member for Laventille East Mova was speaking, he was speaking of the fact that the program that is being pursued in Russell Latapy School and the other schools in East Port of Spain is I Am the Change. But I find that this document is very low on change. It is almost that like you have a static education system and you are making some administrative and structural changes in it, but the entire system, from teaching and learning, curriculum, the way you design classroom and learning and teaching, all of that remains the same, very static. And I feel I have a serious problem with that, given where the world is headed, and given the fact that this draft education policy talks about the fact that it is really in pursuit of national sustainable development. So, and when I look at all the arrangements here all the maps, all the charts, I see that it is really Ministry of Education driven outward to the society rather than the world as it is functioning, coming back to what is the education system that we need, how do we need to structure it, how do we design curriculum, and how ultimately we need to manage it. What needs to be centralized, what needs to be decentralized. And I think that this document is very weak on this. And if we continue with this document and find a way of making it policy, I think the education system in Trinidad and Tobago is going to be largely fossilized. And I want to warn against that. I am willing to make my contribution to this document, but I'm saying that this document as it stands is exceptionally weak, and I really think that we need to do something with it in order to bring it alive. But the document identifies some concerns that are real. Lack of alignment between ECCE, primary and secondary school curricula, page 64. This militates against an effective, transparent, and fair system of the transitioning of students between ECC, primary, and secondary educational levels. The curriculum is not practical, realistic enough to facilitate needs and pique the wider interest of students. And the lack of adaptability of the primary curriculum to suit the requirements of students with special education needs. So it is not totally unaware. It is alert to some of the issues. And I simply want to read from the document one more page, I think. I can't find the page now. I had it earlier, but I don't want to spend the time to look for it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I would like to say that the Ministry of Education needs to look at this again. I do not think it is adequate or appropriate. I don't think it speaks to any change that you need. And if that program in Laventille East Mova is seen as a pilot that is making a difference, then that in itself tells you that there is something terribly wrong with the existing system as it is. So, I want to ask Mr. Deputy Speaker, what are the basic questions? How do human beings live? We breathe air, right? That's the first thing. We don't make that. It's there, and we breathe it. That's how we live. We capture and we harness water, and we use that. It's essential for living. All right? We produce food, and we make food to the point that we put it on the table by cooking and so on. We have to have shelter from the elements. And you also need to have energy, both your own human energy and the energy sources that you can find in the natural environment, like the sun, but you also need to create energy and generate energy, as we do, let's say, in Trinidad and Tobago, from oil and natural gas, etc. And what is the purpose of education in a real way? I talked about the fact that it is to you sit exams, you do work, you develop a life, etc. But the real purpose of education is to teach people how to identify problems and how to solve those problems. Civilization depends on that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The purpose of education is to teach people to identify what a problem is, or if something is happening, what is the problem, and then to find a solution for it. And there is nothing in this draft education policy paper that tells me that our education system is preparing our students for problem identification and for solution finding. And that is the big issue. From the air that we breathe and the pollution that we make, to find solutions for that, for the water that we drink, and to manage the problem, let's say, of flooding, irrigation, water capture, all of these things. We need solutions for that. What else did I identify? For the food that we eat, and how you produce the food to make the country and the region self-sufficient, from the energy issues, the shelter issues. What kind of shelter do you build in countries that are prone to hurricanes and that are prone to earthquakes in the Caribbean? All of those things are problem issues that we should be addressing at the university, in the school system, the curriculum issues, the research issues. And I feel that if we continue in this notion of continuing to incrementally evolve the education system as we are from the colonial order which we found, those of us who are older were part of it, those of us who are younger perhaps do not understand it except that they receive the education in the same mode. But I feel that we have a real problem. And I think that if we are trying to create an education system for sustainable development, what is sustainable development, Mr. Deputy Speaker? It is sustainable development takes you beyond mere economic considerations. It is about human, it's about environmental, it's about community. It requires collaboration in order to do it. If you are going to build an education system for sustainable development, and for the 17 goals of the United Nations, you have to take these things into account. Because, and there's another matter, which is that sustainable development has not been achieved anywhere in the world. And the world is searching for a solution for sustainable development. That is why there is so much research. That is why there is so much collaboration. That is why there is such a big quest to find answers to this problem of how do you deal with climate change, how do you deal with islands, how do you deal with all of these things. So the very fact that sustainable development is a goal that you aspire to and you are working towards, but it has never been achieved in the world is searching for it, and it has never been achieved anywhere. Some countries are better off than others by the things that they have been doing. What this means is that sustainable development is without precedent. And sustainable development being without precedent, it then necessitates the kind of pilots that he was talking about. It necessitates experimentation, and it demands, and I want to make this clear, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it demands perpetual innovation. So that the key issue in education today in the world, and certainly for Trinidad and Tobago, is how do you create an innovative education system that can create innovators coming out of the system. Because if you do not do that, this sustainable, elusive sustainable development, which is without precedent, can never be achieved. Because you need innovators to make that possible. Now, when you make public policy, and education is primary public policy, education is about your human capital. It is about your social capital. It is about the quality of the society you eventually evolve, the quality of the families, the quality of communities, the entrepreneurial talent that goes out of the education system and creates wealth and creates business. So this is a very important public policy issue. It requires collaboration between government and other sectors, a key one being, of course, the education sector, the stakeholders, the players themselves. What is the other important thing in this society, Mr. Deputy Speaker? The other important thing in this society is competitiveness. All right, we have a situation, for instance, with the energy sector now, in which, as I have pointed out here in another debate, the downstream petrochemical sector is becoming uncompetitive for certain reasons. Okay, yet at the same time, the Proton report, Partners report, pointed out that that is perhaps the most lucrative sector in the gas chain in Trinidad and Tobago. So if you have a challenge like that, which is how do you deal with the question of competitiveness? Competitiveness requires collaboration between industries in the private sector and government, and should involve a partnership between government, private sector, education sector, NGO, and civil society sector. so that you can get your society moving in that way. So,
Honorable Member, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15 minutes. Do you care to avail yourself?
I would like to continue if you'd like me.
Proceed.
Thank you very much. So, as I said, sustainable development requires perpetual innovation. And we also require competitiveness in the private sector. And if you want to have perpetual innovation for sustainable development, and you need innovation in the private sector also for competitiveness, how are you going to get that if you do not have critical thinkers, creative thinkers, entrepreneurs, business creators, innovators, who can cross multidisciplinary boundaries and who can use their imagination in a way to get back to the original intention of education, which is to identify the problem and how to solve it. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to say that much was done in the 5 years of the People's Partnership. You can tell from the results that were articulated here, whether it was in SEA, CSEC, the improvements in the performance of children, the number of children, the introduction of technology in the schools through the laptops, the elements of the number of scholarships that were given in important areas, the emphasis on numeracy, literacy, science and technology. Those things were very, very important. And what was required of a government coming after was to recognize those achievements and either build on them or, while building on them, to make the necessary changes given the fact that the world was changing around you. And the critical area in which those changes were taking place are in fact what is happening around us. When you look at the education policies of other countries, you begin to see what it is they are looking after. And you begin to see how far away we are from where the progressive countries and the progressive thinking in the world is. We cannot go with this kind of policy, Madam Speaker. I want to say that. We cannot go with this kind of policy. We are going to be stuck in the present, stuck in the past. We have to move. And when you look at, for instance, this one, mobile technology, the key to bringing education to all, the UN Broadband Commission, UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova, and I'm quoting from her, we need to tap this inventiveness to improve education, especially for girls and women, but we have a long way to go. 2/3 of the illiterate adults are women, and 2/3 of the world's out-of-school primary age of children are primary age children. Now, Trinidad and Tobago is a lot better than this. We don't have a problem with girls not getting an education in that way. The girls are ahead. We have a problem with the boys. So we have to find out now, how do we get the boys involved in education in a way that allows them to compete with the girls? Because that is the reality of Trinidad and Tobago. And more than that, when I say compete with the girls, I don't mean compete with the girls. I mean compete at the level at which the girls are performing. And so this is one of the things, and one of the ways you do it is by technology. And when you take technology out of the school, or you limit the access to technology, or you do not introduce it in teaching and learning, and you embed it in the education system, what you are doing is doing a disservice to a generation who must depend on that technology for their life. Look at this other one. This is from UNESCO too. Sustainability education is often referred to as education for sustainable development. All right? So I will just read one thing here, just to make the point. It requires participatory teaching and learning methods that motivate and empower learners to change their behavior and take action for sustainable development. Education for sustainable development consequently promotes competencies like critical thinking, imagining future scenarios, and making decisions in a collaborative way. You think you can engender these behaviors in the structure of the school that we have here and the curriculum design that we are throwing at our children in the school system, Madam Speaker? I do not think so at all. I know that the Minister of Education will agree with me that it cannot be done in the existing system. Look at this one. Education for Sustainable Development is from UNESCO. Education for Sustainable Development empowers learners to take informed decisions and responsible action for environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society for present and future generations while respecting cultural diversity. You think our society needs that? We need it bad. Madam Speaker, this is a serious problem in Trinidad and Tobago. The whole society is falling apart at the level of the family, disintegration, at the level of the individual with drugs and gambling, and other vices that have become prevalent all over the place. We are seeing it every day. We are now inundated by the migration situation, which is going to complicate the social factor. We need this seriously. So if we really want to educate for sustainable development, if we know that we need not just workers, we have a diversification problem, we've got to identify that. We've got to identify where the jobs are in terms of a diversification strategy. We've got to identify where we are going in science and technology, where we are going, as my colleague from Chaguanas East mentioned, in that economy which has to do with the Internet of Things, the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence. We can do all of these things. We have to transform the curriculum of the school, primary, secondary, tertiary, in order to make that possible. And if we want entrepreneurs, which are the people who create wealth and create business and build businesses in your country to export to other countries, you have to have a school and an education system to provide those people. They don't come out of a hat. And you don't give them an education that is traditional and conventional and give them a certificate and then tell them to go out and be entrepreneurs. It doesn't happen. There has to be an acculturation process. Madam Speaker, I speak about this because I'm passionate about these things. These are serious, serious issues. They talk about, you know, we have a problem of medical graduates in Trinidad and Tobago. They can't get jobs, they don't know what to do, some of them migrating. Look, this article deals with the question, the role of innovation and entrepreneurship education in improving employability of medical university students. And this comes from China. It looks at a Chinese case. Some of those are from Western societies here. Look at this one, teaching innovation and entrepreneurship for 21st century success. That's where the world is going. You creating all these workers, where are they going to work? This is not a Trinidad and Tobago problem, even if we diversify. This is a world problem. We had a situation in the 1980s, Madam Speaker, in which the headlines of the economists was jobless growth. This is the 1980s. We are in the 21st century now. And what you are dealing is with technological driven growth, in which you have the traditional thing, which is that you have the technology and all you need is a watchman to prevent people from coming and interfering with the technology. So I think that it's a mistake to try to provide an educational policy of this kind, which takes us to 2022, which has, in my view, no connection with the future. Because the education policy of today cannot look at what we did before. It cannot look at where we are. It must look at those two things, but it must also look at where the world is going. So this one, climate change, education and awareness. Integrating climate change and education at primary and secondary level. Climate change and education from the Commonwealth. innovation and control, universities, the knowledge economy and the authoritarian state in China. Again, it raises the issue of knowledge being the passport to freedom, knowledge being the passport to opportunity, knowledge being the passport to innovative and imaginative capacity. But if you do not have a society that is relatively free, in which democracy is practiced, that undermines the capacity for education. And of course, something here on higher education in the era of the fourth industrial estate, measuring innovation in education in the English system. And there are many examples from countries as far away or far apart as the OECD, as a country like Malaysia, as countries like Vietnam, and as very, very progressive countries as Finland, Madam Speaker. So my contribution here today, Madam Speaker, is to say to the Minister of Education, since he is responsible for education, and taking into account the condemnation of the condition of education in Trinidad and Tobago, which I fully support, as articulated by the member for Chaguanas East, I am going further to say that the policy that is now before us for consideration is inadequate and inappropriate to the task, and we need a complete rethinking of how we deal with this business of education for the future in Trinidad and Tobago. Or else we are going to end up as one of the backward states who have a big education plan, and our people are going to be going nowhere. Thank you very, very much.